The sky over New Houston was dark with storm clouds, but the streets below were full of noise and flashing lights. Alien Inspector Varric stepped out of the shuttle. His silver uniform shining under the rain, he had traveled across 7 sectors. To reach this place, sent by the Galactic Council to investigate disturbing reports about humans. They said humans had no emotions when facing extreme violence. They said humans could watch death and destruction without blinking. Varric did not believe it, but now he was here to see the truth for himself. His translator buzzed in his ear as the smells of fried food and smoke filled the air. He walked slowly through the crowded streets, passing vendors selling glowing drinks and strange meat on sticks. The humans were loud, laughing, and shouting at giant screens hanging over the road. At first, Varric thought it was some kind of celebration. Then he looked closely at the screens and froze. The screens showed 2 men inside a steel cage. They were not playing a sport. They were fighting to the death. Blood covered the floor, and the crowd roared every time a punch landed. One man's face was already swollen and broken, but he stood up again and attacked. Varric waited for security to stop the fight, but instead, more humans cheered and placed bets. His 3 hearts beat faster. This was not an emergency for them. This was entertainment. A young human woman beside him noticed his wide eyes, first time watching cage fights. She asked with a smile. Varric didn't answer. He was too busy trying to understand why no one was horrified in his own world. Even seeing an injured animal would make people cry. Here, violence seemed to bring joy. The woman handed him a glowing drink. "Don't worry, they signed up for it," she said casually. Then she turned back to the fight, cheering as one man slammed the other into the cage wall. The sound of the crowd was so loud that Varric almost didn't notice the fight outside. The cage, 2 drunk men argued near a betting table within seconds. One smashed a bottle and swung it at the other. Blood sprayed on the floor. No one screamed, no one ran. The crowd barely turned their heads. A guard walked over slowly, pulled the 2 men apart, and pushed them toward the exit. It was as if violence was just a normal part of life. Varric secretly activated his wrist recorder, capturing every moment. Rain began to fall harder. But the crowd didn't care. The fighters in the cage kept hitting each other until one finally collapsed. The winner raised his arms while the loser lay still, breathing but unconscious, instead of panic. The audience clapped and whistled. 2 medics came in and dragged the loser away while the next pair of fighters entered. Varric felt a cold shiver. He had come expecting to see fear or sadness. Instead, he saw excitement and celebration. He turned down a side street, trying to clear his mind. But even there, he saw violence. 2 boys were fighting over a bag of food, punching each other until one fell. An older man simply walked past them, muttering something about kids these days Varric could not understand. On his planet, even minor injuries caused public attention and sympathy. Here, people acted like violence was as common as breathing. A deep voice called from behind, "You're not from around here, are you?" Varric turned to see a tall human man in military clothes. His name tag read Captain Harris. "I am here for observation," Varric said carefully. Harris grinned. "Observation? Then you've come to the right city." Before Varric could respond, a voice shouted from a communicator on Harris's shoulder. "Captain? Raiders attacked Colony Outpost 7, over 100 dead." Varric expected Harris to react with shock, maybe even grief. Instead, Harris simply nodded and said, "Got it. We'll prepare for the next move." Varric stared at him. "Do you not feel anything?" he asked quietly. Harris looked at him and shrugged. "Feel later, act now." Then he walked past. As if the news was nothing more than a change in weather, Varric followed him, unable to resist learning more. That night, rainwater. reflected the city lights as Harris led him through another narrow street. Suddenly, 3 men stepped out of the shadows, holding knives. They demanded Harris's money and weapon. Varric expected fear or negotiation. Instead, Harris moved faster than Varric could follow. In seconds, one man was slammed into the wall. Another had his arm twisted until he screamed, and the third ran away. Harris didn't even look angry. His face was calm, almost bored. He turned to Varric. "Where were we?" "Oh yeah, you wanted to know about humans?" Varric's mind raced. This was only his first day, and already he had seen more violence than in his entire career. But what unsettled him most was not the violence itself. It was the way humans faced it, without fear, without visible pain. It was as if they were built for it, and deep down, Varric wondered if the Galactic Council truly understood the species they were dealing with. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the city still smelled of smoke and steel. Varric followed Captain Harris through the busy streets, trying to make sense of everything he had seen the night before. Humans moved past them in all directions, some carrying weapons as casually as groceries, others laughing while showing bruises. From the previous night's fights, to Varric, it felt like walking through a war zone where no one realized a war was happening. Harris seemed relaxed, even joking with strangers as they passed. Varric's translator caught phrases about last night's match and the guy who lost his teeth. And each time there was laughter, it was as if pain itself was a shared joke here. Varric had studied dozens of civilizations, but never one that treated danger like entertainment. They reached a military checkpoint, and Harris flashed his ID. Soldiers greeted him warmly and didn't even look at Varric twice. Inside the command post, a large screen displayed footage of a distant colony attack. Buildings exploded. People ran in panic, but the humans watching the feed weren't screaming. Some shook their heads, some cursed, but most kept talking calmly, as if they were discussing bad weather. One soldier even reached for a sandwich while the footage showed a building collapsing. Varric couldn't stay silent. "Do none of you feel disturbed by this?" he asked. Harris leaned against the wall. "We feel it, Inspector. But if we stopped to cry every time something bad happened, we'd never get anything done." He said it as if it was the most natural thing in the world. A loud alarm cut through the room. A voice from the comms reported a raid on a supply transport 2 blocks away. Harris grabbed his rifle without hesitation. "You're coming with me," he told Varric. There was no time to argue. They ran through the streets until they reached the transport dock. Smoke rose from a truck, and 5 masked raiders were pulling crates onto a hover sled. Harris didn't wait for backup. He sprinted forward and fired. His shots were precise. 2 raiders dropped instantly. The others returned fire, bullets sparking off metal walls. Varric ducked behind a crate. His hands trembling, Harris moved, like a predator, not wasting a single step within seconds. The remaining raiders were on the ground, wounded but alive. Harris tied them up with a length of cord and called it in. The whole thing lasted less than a minute. Harris checked the truck, tossed Varric a look, and said, "See? We end it fast. No speeches, no drama." Varric realized there was no adrenaline rush in Harris's voice. No sign of joy or hatred. Only efficiency. It was as if violence was just another tool. Like fixing a broken machine on the way back. Harris stopped at a street stall and bought 2 cups of steaming dark liquid. He handed one to Varric. "Coffee. Try it. You'll need it if you're going to keep up with us." Varric sipped, bitter and strong. Harris continued walking as if nothing unusual had happened. They passed a group of children playing in a courtyard. At first, Varric felt relieved, thinking it was finally something normal. Then he noticed their game. They were pretending to raid a fort, some playing defenders, some attackers. The defenders fought back with sticks and makeshift shields while the attackers pretended to shoot. When one child fell dead, the others dragged him out of the way and kept playing. The laughter in their voices was the same as in the streets last night. Varric realized then that humans were raised to see conflict not as chaos, but as part of life. Even their games prepared them for it. He couldn't decide if it was horrifying or brilliant. As they turned another corner, Harris's communicator crackled with another report. This time about an alien smuggler hiding in the district's abandoned tunnels. Harris grinned. You wanted to see how humans deal with things. You're about to get a real education, Varric followed, his mind racing with questions. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice warned him. The more he saw, the more he understood that humans were not numb to violence at all. They had simply learned to walk through it like fire without getting burned, and that made them far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The tunnels beneath the city were damp, cold, and smelled faintly of oil. Varric's boots splashed in shallow puddles as he followed Harris deeper into the shadows. The sound of dripping water echoed through the long passage. Harris moved like he had walked these tunnels 100 times, his rifle ready but his steps calm. Varric's eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of movement. They had been walking for several minutes when a faint metallic clink echoed ahead. Harris froze instantly, raising his fist to signal silence. Varric stopped, holding his breath in the faint light from a cracked ceiling vent. He saw something shift in the shadows. At first, it looked like trash. Then a figure moved, tall and thin, its eyes glinting yellow in the dark, without warning. The smuggler darted away. Harris didn't shout or give chase recklessly. He simply turned and moved at a steady, fast pace, his boots making no unnecessary sound. Varric followed, struggling to keep up. They passed through narrow corridors where the walls were lined with rusting pipes. The air grew warmer, and the sound of machinery hummed somewhere far away. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber lit by a flickering blue lamp. The smuggler was there, pulling a long, sleek weapon from a crate. Two more figures stepped out from behind broken machinery. All armed, Harris didn't hesitate. In one smooth motion, he stepped forward, firing short bursts. The room filled with deafening echoes. Two smugglers dropped to the floor, their weapons clattering. The third fired back, the shot sizzling past Varric's head and scorching the wall. Varric's heart pounded. Harris advanced without fear. His eyes locked on the last smuggler. In a blur of motion, Harris swung the butt of his rifle, knocking the weapon from the alien's hands. A sharp kick sent the smuggler crashing into a wall. Harris pressed his rifle to the alien's chest and said, "It's over." But the alien laughed, coughing up dark green blood. "You think this is violence? You humans don't know real violence yet." Harris didn't flinch. He bound the smuggler's hands with a strip of torn cable and pushed him toward the exit. "Maybe not, but you're not walking out of here with that shipment." As they moved back through the tunnels, Varric noticed something strange. Harris didn't celebrate the capture, didn't show anger, didn't even seem tense. He walked as if nothing unusual had happened. Just another task checked off a list. Varric finally asked, "Why are you so calm? You could have been killed." Harris gave a small shrug. "Could have, but didn't. That's enough." They emerged into daylight again, the city noise rushing over them. The smuggler was loaded into a transport vehicle, and Harris lit a cigarette. The casual way he stood there, as if the last 20 minutes hadn't been a deadly encounter, unsettled Varric more than the fight itself. Later, in the military post, Harris joined other soldiers at a table. They were laughing, telling stories. One soldier described a mission where they lost 2 team members and called it a rough Tuesday. The others nodded like it was normal. Varric sat quietly, realizing the truth was more complex than he thought. These humans weren't emotionless. They carried their emotions somewhere deep inside, far away from their faces. That night, As Varric walked back to his quarters, he heard distant shouting. Looking down an alley, he saw two men fighting. One bleeding badly from a head wound. A group of people stood around, not horrified, but watching. Almost as if waiting to see who would win, Varric turned away, his mind heavy with questions. The council had sent him to report on human detachment from violence, but what he was seeing was something different, something older and harder to understand. He wondered if humans had not lost their emotions at all, but instead had learned to survive by hiding them until the right moment. And if that was true, then maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous thing about humans was not their weapons. It was the fact that nothing seemed to shake them. Varric had spent nights replaying the scenes he had witnessed, the cage fight, the street brawls, the raids, the tunnels. Each memory left the same question burning in his mind. Were humans truly numb to violence, or did they simply bury their reactions so deep that no one could see them? The Galactic Council would demand a clear answer, and he wasn't ready to give one. He needed proof, something undeniable, so he arranged an experiment. He requested a group of human volunteers, soldiers, civilians, even a few teenagers. They gathered in a dim training hall. The walls lined with old combat dummies and cracked holoscreens. Harris stood at the side, watching with his arms crossed. Varric explained that they would be shown simulations designed to test their emotional limits. These will be realistic, he warned. You may wish to leave. Not one person stepped away. The first simulation projected a burning village. Alien civilians screamed for help as monstrous attackers closed in. Varric waited for panic, for horror, but instead he saw the humans leaning forward, eyes sharp, pointing out tactical weaknesses in the enemy's formation. A teenage boy muttered, "They should have blocked that side street." And a woman in civilian clothes nodded in agreement. The second simulation was worse. A lone soldier trapped under rubble as enemy forces approached. Blood streamed down. His face, he called for help, his voice cracking. Varric turned to watch his subjects. They didn't look away, didn't flinch. One of them said, "He needs to use the rubble as cover and shoot low." Harris even smirked. "That guy still has a sidearm, he's fine." Varric paused the program. "Do you not feel anything for these people?" he asked. His voice was sharper than he intended. Harris tilted his head. "We feel it, Inspector, but feeling doesn't fix the problem. Solving it does, to push further." Varric activated the third scenario. This time, the victims were not alien strangers, but perfect human replicas, civilians and children. The attackers were brutal. The screams loud, the scene was chaos. Varric expected at least some visible discomfort. But what he saw made his skin crawl. The humans' expressions didn't twist in fear. They became colder, more focused. Harris's voice was steady. "This is just a situation. Situations have solutions. You act first, you feel later," and then something happened that wasn't part of Varric's plan. A loud bang echoed through the real hall. Not the simulation. The lights flickered. The emergency siren blared. Harris was already moving toward the door before Varric could process it. A soldier shouted from the corridor, "Security breach, armed intruder in the West Wing." Varric's pulse raced. He had designed a safe, controlled test. But now there was real danger. The humans didn't hesitate. Civilians grabbed training weapons from the racks. Soldiers moved in tight groups. Within seconds, the volunteers were acting as a unit, blocking hallways, herding bystanders toward exits. Harris barked quick orders, his voice calm, as if this was just another drill. Varric found himself pushed into a corner with two soldiers guarding him. "Stay here, Inspector," one said, before vanishing into the shadows. Gunfire erupted in the distance. Harris's voice came through the comms. "Intruder down. No casualties." Minutes later, the group returned, weapons lowered, eyes scanning the room for threats. No cheers, no drama, just quiet confirmation that the job was done. The simulation equipment still flickered on the wall, the fake battle frozen in mid-scene. Varric realized his experiment had been answered without the simulations at all. He had just seen humans face real violence again, and the result was the same. No panic, no outward fear. Only action. Harris walked back in, wiping a smear of prass. I peed a smear of soot from his cheek. Guess you got more than you planned today, he said. Varric nodded slowly. He now understood something the Council never had. Humans were not detached from violence because they lacked emotions. They were dangerous because they had learned to master those emotions completely. The smell of scorched metal hit Varric before the alarms even started. He had been in the middle of writing his preliminary notes for the Galactic Council when the walls of the spaceport office trembled. Outside the window, a column of black smoke rose from Docking Bay 6, and the sharp crack of weapons fire followed seconds later. Harris's voice came through the calm but clipped. Inspector, stay where you are. We've got incoming. Varric stepped to the balcony and saw the chaos unfold. Dozens of armed alien pirates had breached the landing zone. Their ships were small and fast. Weaving between civilian freighters, pirates poured out, cutting down anyone in their path. On Varric's homeworld, such an attack would have caused total collapse. Panic in every street. Here, it was the opposite. Humans were already moving, not away from the danger, but toward it. Civilians grabbed whatever they could, tools, pipes, even loose cargo chains, and began blocking access points. Mechanics in grease-stained overalls pulled sidearms from hidden lockers and took firing positions. A woman carrying a baby shouted to another to take her child, then ran toward the fighting with a stun baton. Harris appeared from the smoke, helmet under one arm, barking orders. Shut the east gate, cover the freight lanes, no one gets through. His soldiers moved like clockwork, but so did the ordinary. Citizens Varric couldn't process the speed of it. There was no screaming, no freezing in fear. The injured were pulled to safety and treated on the spot. A teenager ripped off his own shirt to make a bandage for a wounded dock worker. An old man calmly loaded ammunition into the hands of passing soldiers. A pirate ship broke through the defense line. Skidding across the landing pad, its hatch blew open. A wave of fighters charged forward. Harris didn't hesitate. He sprinted straight at them, sliding behind a cargo hauler for cover. Two soldiers flanked from the sides, cutting the attackers down before they could advance. Harris vaulted over the wreckage, firing as he moved. Varric was still frozen at the balcony, watching the impossible. A group of children in an evacuation shelter were passing boxes of ammunition down a human chain to defenders outside. They were quiet, focused. As if this were a school exercise, the fighting lasted 13 minutes. Varric counted every one. 13 minutes from the first explosion to the last pirate being dragged into custody. The humans began clearing debris, securing ships, and helping the wounded, all without a hint of triumph or celebration. Harris walked past Varric, wiping blood from his arm where a blade had grazed him. His voice was steady. That's done. We'll rebuild before nightfall. Varric stared at him. You were outnumbered, outgunned. You didn't even hesitate. Harris gave the same answer he had before. Feel later. Act now. Then he turned to coordinate repair crews, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as night fell. The spaceport was already returning to normal. Lights from incoming freighters glowed in the dark sky. The smell of burning still lingered. But the people moved on with the same energy as before. Varric realized there would be no mass grief ceremony, no pause for collective mourning. They would remember the losses privately, in silence. And the next day, they would face whatever came without complaint. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Varric felt something more than curiosity. He felt unease, because now he understood that humans didn't simply survive violence, They absorbed it, learned from it, and came back stronger. And that meant if the Council ever thought they could intimidate this species into submission, they were already too late. Asterisk the repairs. At the spaceport, stretched late into the night. But Harris insisted Varek take a walk with him, away from the noise of welding torches and the shouts of workers. The streets were strangely quiet. Harris led him to a small park on the edge of the district, where a few dim lamps flickered under. The weight of the evening fog, on a weathered bench, sat an old man in a faded military coat. His hair was white, his face marked by deep lines, but his eyes were sharp. Harris greeted him with the respect of a soldier meeting an officer. "Inspector, this is Sergeant Cole, fought in 3 wars before you were even born." Cole shook Varek's hand with surprising strength. The old man's voice was rough but steady. "Harris tells me you're here to figure out what's wrong with us." Varek hesitated. "Not wrong, Sergeant. Unusual, humans seem to meet violence without fear, without visible pain. It's unlike anything I've seen." Cole gave a dry laugh. "Fear's there. Pain's there too. We just learned a long time ago not to let it run the show." He leaned back, looking up at the dim stars where I grew up. "You didn't get the luxury of falling apart. You got hit, you got up, or you didn't get up at all." Varek studied him. "But why hide it? Why not show the fear, the grief?" Cole's gaze dropped to the ground. "Because it spreads, Inspector. You let it out at the wrong time, and it infects everyone around you. A squad that panics dies together. A family that freezes in danger loses everyone, so we carry it. We bury it, and we deal with it when the job's done." Harris was silent, letting the old man speak. Cole's voice softened. "You think we don't cry? We do, but we do it when no one needs us to be strong. In empty rooms, behind closed doors. Sometimes years later," he looked Varek in the eye, "we survive first. We feel later. That's the rule." The wind rustled the leaves. And somewhere far away, a siren wailed before cutting off again. Harris lit a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly in the dark. "Most people think that makes us cold," he said. "But it's not about being cold, it's about not letting." The fire burned out of control. Varek felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't numbness. This was discipline, sharper than any weapon. It was a kind of control that no training program could teach overnight. It was carved into them by centuries of living in a dangerous universe. Cole stood slowly, joints creaking. "You want my advice for your report. Don't tell them we don't feel anything. Tell them we feel everything. We just don't give our enemies the satisfaction of seeing it." He gave Harris a nod and walked away into the fog. Varek stood there a long time after he was gone. The night felt heavier, not because of what he'd learned, but because he knew the Council would never truly understand until they saw it for themselves. And by then, it might be too late. The Galactic Council chamber was silent, except for the faint hum of the translation orbs. Varek stood at the center, the weight of his report heavy in his hands. Around him, representatives from 29 worlds watched with expectant eyes. Some leaned forward, eager for confirmation of the rumors. Others sat back, confident that humans were nothing more than reckless primitives. Varek began without ceremony. "I was sent to determine whether humans lack emotional response to extreme violence." His voice echoed against the curved walls. "The truth is, more complex and far more dangerous." He described the cage fights, the street brawls, the raids, the spaceport attack. He spoke of Harris, of the civilians who fought without hesitation, of the children calmly passing ammunition during battle. Murmurs spread through the chamber. A delegate from the Valari Confederacy interrupted. "So they are numb, like the reports say." Varek shook his head. "No, they feel, perhaps, more than any of us. But they do not let those feelings decide their actions. They can face death with a steady hand and save their grief for later." Sometimes much later, the Eryxian ambassador narrowed his eyes. That is not possible. All sentient life has limits to emotional suppression. Without release, the mind breaks. Varric met his gaze. On your worlds, perhaps on Earth, breaking is not an option. They have learned to master fear, to chain grief until it serves them. That is why they are dangerous. A low ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Varric continued. They are not predators because they enjoy violence. They are predators because they can endure it without losing. Focus, because they can keep moving forward when the rest of us would freeze. He let the words settle. If you mistake their composure for weakness, you will not live long enough to correct the error. The Kalorn delegate scoffed. Exaggeration. Inspector, one species cannot be so resilient. Varric tapped his wrist console, and the chamber's central hall bloomed to life. The recordings played, the pirates at the spaceport, the calm organization under fire. Harris charging into the fray without a flicker of hesitation, civilians arming themselves, children working like seasoned supply officers. There was no cheering, no rage, just quiet, efficient survival. The room grew colder. The Villari ambassador leaned back, his crest flattening. What do you recommend? Varric looked around the chamber, meeting each gaze in turn. Do not provoke them. Do not test the depth of their patience. If you wish for peace, treat them with respect. If you seek war, be prepared to face an enemy who will not stop until you are gone. A long silence followed. The council leader finally spoke, her voice cautious. And you, Inspector? After seeing them up close, what do you believe humans truly are? Varric's answer was quiet, but carried through the hall. They are what the rest of us pretend to be when danger comes. When the session ended, Varric walked out into the bright corridors of the council station, the stars beyond the viewing. Glass glittered like cold eyes, somewhere out there. Harris and his people were already moving on to their next challenge, laughing, working, living, carrying their fire deep inside where no enemy could see it. Varric wondered if the galaxy would ever truly understand them, or if it was better that it didn't.